Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second session of tonight's PEO's 2022 Council Elections All Candidates meetings. My name is Arthur Sinclair, and I will be the moderator for tonight's discussion. Tonight, we will hear from the candidates from the Northern Region Councillor. The three candidates for the position are Dana Montgomery, Agnes Probsic, and Luc Roberge. The electronic meeting with the candidates via webcast enables voters to learn more about the candidates and PEO issues, so more of them will vote. Voters were able to pose questions online in advance of this discussion. We'll try to get as many questions as possible. In accordance with the approved protocol for the All Candidates meeting, as moderator, I may shorten the questions and not read out preambles to questions, may select any question not necessarily the highest ranked, may remove offensive and duplicate questions, and may add questions not on the platform. Each candidate will be provided 2 minutes for opening remarks. I will then direct a question to a candidate. That candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. After the candidate has responded, the two remaining candidates will each have 1 minute to address the first candidate's response to the question. Following the questions period, the candidates will have another 90 seconds for their closing remarks. The order of speakers was determined by a draw earlier this evening. And the views and opinions expressed on this broadcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the PEO and are the responsibility of the candidates. So, without further delay, let's get started with opening remarks. The first candidate for Northern Region Councillor is Dana Montgomery.
Thank you, Arthur. And I'd like to just take a minute to say welcome, nice to meet you, and to my fellow candidates, Agnes and Luc. And thank you everyone for joining this session online. If you're here, then you're interested in PEO, which is great. As Arthur said, my name is Dana Montgomery. I'm located here in Sudbury, Ontario, and I've spent the last 10 years working in the mining and metals industry with the consulting engineering firm Hatch. I am very passionate about engineer. I come from a long line of engineers and know the dedication they have to society and what they give. I think we can be so proud of our profession. We have high academic standards, experience, and professional standards that we always have to uphold. And we need individuals who are interested in maintaining the self-regulation of PEO. And definitely, I really feel very committed to that. The Northern Region, as often is the case with Northern Region, always has some unique and different viewpoints on the way things operate, which I believe I should also be able to represent well. I think engineers are critical to improving the quality of life of so many people in society. And there are challenges that we face currently, and there are always going to be future challenges. And engineers make things work, and you don't hear about them unless things aren't working. So far, PEO has done a great job. PEO is approaching its 100th anniversary, but there are always things that need to be modernized and improvements that can be made to the organization. And I'm very committed to doing that. So that's why I'm here tonight. And thank you.
Thank you. The second candidate for Northern Regional Councillor is Agnes Probsic.
Hi, my name is Agnes. I'm also a mining engineer. Wait, I forgot if Dana was a mining engineer or not. I know you work for Hatch. I'm so sorry. This is silly. Okay, I am a mining engineer. I've worked all over Northern Ontario, from cities like Sudbury to smaller towns such as Red Lake. I've worked both for mining companies as well as consulting firms. I've also worked places like where I am now, where it's about an hour and a half to the nearest town. And so, we stay in camp, hence my surroundings. I know that a lot of people in Northern Ontario are in similar situations, and there's a lot of challenges around it. And I mean, the majority of the council is based out of Toronto and surrounding area. You really want somebody who understands what it's all about, who can listen and knows what you're talking about. I'm really proud of my profession as an engineer. It's something that actually is pretty new to my family. I'm an immigrant, and I understand a fair bit about what that's all about as well. Clearly, this wasn't very thoroughly prepared, but this is me. I'm here. I want to help, and I will do my best. Basically, I'm also not really somebody inside politics an awful lot, so I don't know. I see myself as kind of an outside observer as well.
Thank you. The third candidate for Northern Region Councillor is Luc Roberge.
Thank you, Arthur. Good evening, Donna and Agnes and all participants. I'm located out of North Bay. I'm a retired engineer as of September of last fall. And I spent all my life working in Northern Ontario as a mechanical engineer. I spent some time in Wawa, in Sturgeon Falls, in North Bay, in Timmins. And I'm quite familiar with the challenge the North is facing when it comes down to address certain issues when compared to people that reside in the GTA, for example. So who I am, I've been in the industry for 34 years. I've been in the chapter movement for something like 17 years. I've and volunteers in the 3 chapters, Algoma, Porcupine, and here in North Bay. I've also been very active in my current 2 years as Northern Regional Councillor. I've been I'm currently chair of the HRC HR committee. I've been a member of the Finance Committee. I'm part of the Joint Relation Committee with OSPI. I've been fairly active, and one thing that I did learn through my current year and a half out of 2 years on council is that one needs to be prepared to devote time. And I was able to make it happen during the first year and a half. On average, one needs something like a day and a half to 2 days. I would say a week, but that could be a bit much. But let's say it differently by 2 weeks. You need to spend a fair amount of time, and I've developed a system to do that and be able to represent the challenge that faces the North. And one of the biggest things that we face, I run out of time. I'm sorry. One of the biggest challenge that we face as association is licensing, and that's a key part that we need to address. Thank you, and sorry for running out over time.
Thank you very much. Then that concludes the opening remarks. Let's go to the combination of questions. The first question goes to Dana Montgomery. How would you define PEO's mandate?
Thanks, Arthur. PEO's mandate to me is always, it's written on the website, it's very clear, it's to serve and protect the public interest by setting high academic standards and professional experience and practice standards. And I when I first read this as a starting engineer, I kind of wondered, how did this come about? And you look at what the history of PEO, and it was said, okay, engineers are the best people to self-regulate themselves. And this makes perfect sense. So engineers are serving and protecting the public with what they do, and we're the best to regulate it. So that's the PEO's mandate to me, is just to serve and protect the public with the proper standards that we put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Agnes. Your response to the first question, the candidate's answer. How would you define PEO's mandate?
All right. Well, I'm going to come with my own answer, I guess. according to the Act, the PEO's mandate, the principal object of the association is to regulate the practice of professional engineering and to govern its members, holders of certificates of authorization, holders of temporary licenses, holders of provisional licenses, and holders of limited licenses in accordance with this Act, the regulations, and the bylaws in order that the public interest may be served and protected. So that's it. That's what PEO is here for, to ensure that the law is followed and to ensure that people are protected. And that means the public, but it also means, you know, our workers and other people who we interact with in our work.
Thank you, Agnes. And the third candidate, Luke, your response to the first candidate's answer. How would you define PEO's mandate?
Thanks, Arthur. It's basically to regulate the engineering profession in order to protect the public interest. And that is achieved through three components. One is establishing professional standard, which can be found on the website. The licensing requirement, and that is achieved through an extensive academic review and experience review. And the third part is enforcement, and is to make sure that all license holders act in a professional and according to our code of ethics. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question, building on the same theme that we just touched on, the next question goes first to Agnes. What do you see as your role as a councillor, that is, as a member of the board of directors of the organization, in the fulfillment of the mandate?
Okay. Well, basically, there's the opportunity to be involved in things like discipline committees and other ways of promoting the mandate. And basically, I know that. Wow, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I think you're gonna have to cut me off. I'm sorry.
No, nothing to be sorry about. It's not cut off. There's nothing wrong with taking less than the allotted time. So going through the order, Luke, over to you. What do you see as your role or response to the previous, if you prefer?
The role of a councillor is to support council in the execution of the strategic plan and to make sure that there's adequate resources allocated to be able to execute it. And that is done through policy involvement, like updating, revising, monitoring PO's performance and as an organization, and also to support activities like the governance review that's happening right now in order to make sure that we strengthen our profession, and also to make sure that the big threat that is always there for a self-regulating body is being perceived as an entity that is more interested in protecting the interests of the license holders than what the true mandate is, which is to protect the public interest.
Thank you.
All of that, the goal is to execute what has been delegated to us through the Professional Engineers Act.
Thank you very much. And over to Dana, your response.
So my thought on the role of how, as a councillor, how can we operate and help PEO with the governance issue? So a lot of this governance issues is about helping the PEO define a strategic objective, and this governance roadmap that PEO has put in place to modernize is a great place. And I think it's where any councillor is going to. That's a starting point. It's keeping that big picture in mind, looking at the strategic objectives, and always going back to the mandate. This mandate of they serve and protect the public interest. And as Luke mentioned, it's not about so much protecting the members, but allowing the members to function to their highest ability and protecting the public through any actions that these members take. It's really important that the councillors, I think, take both roles. And there's also the role of Northern representing the North as well.
Thank you. So, moving away from into sort of more current events, what challenges and opportunities are apparent from how PEO operations responded to the COVID-19 pandemic? And how should PEO prepare for a similar emergency or disruption in the future? That question is up. Luke, you're first on that one.
Thanks, Arthur. The biggest opportunity that PEO has in the organization is moving toward a web-based platform. What I mean by that is the professional practice exam used to be a paper form throughout. Now it's a national exam. The holder is APEGA, I guess, the Alberta regulator. But the idea is to have a common fraction web-based, and that when you have mobility issues like what's happening in COVID, it's a great example. Go paperless. The less paper you have, the easier it makes the whole job and execute efficiently, because that is the biggest challenge of the academic review committee and the experience. It's all paper-based, and you need the paper to be able to move the licensing along. I'm running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And going down the list, the next response would be from Agnes. How, in terms of the challenges and opportunities that you see with COVID, or how would you respond?
All right. So, I mean, definitely an opportunity, which has already been mentioned, but it's very obvious, and that is, all the money that you can save by being able to do many things online. People like me, well, like all three of us, really not necessarily needing to travel in order to attend council meetings and so on. As far as paperless, I love the idea of going paperless in general in terms of, with the trees and all that stuff. But it's really not a good idea to do that if you don't have a really good way of confirming people's identities and ensuring that things aren't duplicated, stuff like that. And that's what I think.
Thank you. And Dana, over to you.
Thanks, Arthur. My thoughts on this are I noticed that PEO, they put out several statements during the start of the COVID pandemic. And like many companies, there is this initial back and forth of how are we going to get our people online? How are we going to do this remote work? And that was a struggle for every organization. I was very glad to see that PEO has moved away from the paper-based PPE exam to the NPPE exam, which is online. And it takes a long time to move an organization like PEO to digital records in a way that's done safely, where privacy and security are maintained. This is just the way that we're moving forward. Digital seals is the way. Agnes mentioned maintaining being able to confirm people are who they say they are. That's always a concern. I'm running out of time here. I have so much to say on this, but I guess you have an idea of where I'm going. So thank you.
Well, the next question in the order comes to you, Dana, and staying sort of with a similar theme. Weaknesses, if any, should PEO seek to improve in its role as a regulator or in its governance model?
I think it has been identified in the Clayton report, the new governance roadmap, are identifying some of these issues that the PEO has been slow to modernize. Many systems are online, they're digital systems. That's expected now. That has been, I think, the primary thing I've heard from most engineers. Why is PEO slow to modernize? Other challenges, I think that, and it has been identified as well, as these emerging professions. How are they being regulated? Are they being regulated? Whose job is it to regulate it? Should PEO just only be regulating the core disciplines? I think that's an area where there needs to be some work done. And those, I think the roadmap is addressing most of the issues that most people have brought forward, which is very positive. So thank you.
Thank you. The first response goes to Luke.
Thank you, Arthur.
Thesis of Weaknesses, if any.
I see this as a three-part. To repeat what Dana said, it's slow to modernize. Being a year and a half on council, I've seen that, and also that has limited the ability to the organization to adequately respond in a timely fashion. And an example of that is in the licensing process. It's slow. It's something that it's very in the front of everyone. And that is compounded that we've not addressed properly all the emerging discipline that have come up, which made the whole application process very difficult. Also, another part to that is, what do you do when you don't have a PNG as a supervisor? And the whole process needs to be revamped to make it a lot shorter, from cradle to grave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next response goes to Agnes.
All right. I'm going to need that question repeated if you don't mind.
I'll be with pleasure. So what weaknesses, if any, should PEO seek to improve in its role as a regulator or in its governance model?
Am I coming up?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Weaknesses that the PEO needs to tighten up. So yes, definitely how people get licensed. I know there's so much. A lot of people just don't even bother. So there's that. And essentially the fact that a lot of EITs or even people who won't even register to be EITs are content to just carry on as they are. There definitely needs to be like a better reason for graduates to come and to come and actually get themselves licensed.
Thank you. So the next question goes to Agnes. And one of the last one on sort of the same theme, strengths as weaknesses. What do you see as the PEO's strengths as a regulator?
All right. So one thing that the PEO has got that really none of the other associations have got is a really large membership base. So, our fees don't have to be really high, and we get, just as much service out of that. That's, that's a strength that's not really because of anything anybody did. It's just how it is. Aside from that, there's a lot of really great people with a lot of really great ideas. And definitely that's something that we need to be able to capitalize on in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Then the next response, I'll go over to Luke for that. What do you see as the PEO strengths?
I see three key ones. And one of his biggest strengths is PEO has over 1,000 volunteers that work at different levels on different committees. And there's a lot of broad-based knowledge that is brought forward because of that. And that has tremendous value. The other one are more, they somewhat fall together. One of them is the PNG trademark. That means something. When you talk out there about, hey, you're an engineer, like I got a PN, it means something and people can relate to that. And all of that, and that was established because PO has strong values that they operate by, and those decisions are based in the public interest. And all of that is supported by a very strong code of ethics. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to Dana. What do you think?
I have to agree with Luke on this one. I think the volunteers are a critical component and such a strong part of what PEO does well. There are so many very dedicated and volunteers, and that really speaks to the pride people have in the organization. I also think looking back at the 100-year history, that's been something that's been consistent throughout. There's a pride in the profession. There's a pride in the trust that people have in the engineering seal and the knowledge that engineers have. I think something else that PEO has done very well is recently implemented this governance roadmap, which is outlining, okay, here's where we are. There has been a lot of change with technology the last 30 years. Where do we need to be going forward to stay relevant and to make sure that the public interest is protected? There are a lot of things that PEO is doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we've talked strengths, we've talked weaknesses. Let's talk about a little bit on the future. The next question goes first to Luke. How should council go about developing a vision for the PEO for the next 5 years?
That's a tough one because we have such a large membership. Ideally, a vision to represent something for everybody. Everyone needs to have a say to it so that they can feel part of it. But being such a large organization, we can't. So basically, unfortunately, council would have to look at a way of doing this on a much reduced level involvement. So putting a committee together, establishing workshop through the province, so that we have all the regional representation working through a facilitator. Once you get the impact from the region, then have a key representative from all those regions back. Then you have a final workshop where you put a document together and then you present it for council for review. See, a vision needs to be the voice of the people, of the license holders. It's not something that's pushed down. Thank you.
And next, I'm going to throw to Agnes. How would you respond? What would you see as go about developing a vision for the next 5 years?
Okay. So with engineering being a self-regulated profession, PEO really needs to go back to the professionals that are being regulated to develop this vision. So, there's all sorts of different ways to go about this. Committees, questionnaires, focus groups, all sorts of things. I know that there have been a lot of consultants in use in the past, and there definitely is a place for consultants, but they can't be considered the final word. And that's basically my thoughts on how PEO should develop a vision for the next 5 years.
Thank you very much. And Dana, how would you respond?
PEO, I think for 5 years is a very short time frame in a 100-year history of the organization. 5 years is quite short. So it's a big thing to say what's a vision for 5 years, because 5 years isn't a lot of time to work in an organization like PEO, which a lot of the board governance is required by elected individuals. A few of the things that I would look at that maybe need to address, maybe modernization of the Act. As mentioned, new licensure models, considering entity regulation, Canadian experience alternatives. I think that should be a bit more thought put into what that entails, non-practicing classes of license, and any specialist designations. I've read a lot about maybe the exact model isn't perfect, so a bit more, some thought put into those just at a very high level. It's a big topic.
Sure is. So this next question, we talked about the organization, we talked about strengths, weaknesses, and the future, but let's shift it a little bit to let's talk about you. So the next, excuse me, next question goes to Dana. About you, what special skills, experience, ideas do you bring to enhance the governance of PEO?
I'm glad you asked the question. I have had experiences on other boards, leading through strategic change. Most recently with the Meals on Wheels Sudbury, we completely brought about bringing frozen meals up north where they had originally were shipped from down south. So strategic change in an organization, I think it would be one of them. Other important skills, as I mentioned, I work in consulting engineering, and I think one of the key things you get from that is you're always dealing with a lot of different stakeholders. You need to learn to communicate, listen to a wide variety of perspectives and different opinions on how things should be done. So those definitely the work aspect, my previous volunteer experience I think would be a benefit to PEO. I think that would probably, that's a very high level, would be what I would contribute to the organization.
Thank you very much. Luke, I'm through to you. What skills, experience, ideas do you bring to enhance the governance?
Having been on council for a year and a half, I've learned a lot. And that has been supported from my previous volunteer experience. I've been a volunteer for 17 years, not only in PO, but also with Boy Scout. So I've done a lot of work. So I've learned what it means to working with stakeholders, learning to listen. And also being a manager, you also, being a senior manager in an organization, you learn how to look at those strategic directives and going forward. And I see myself as an individual as participating. I'm an active participant. I'm not just one that sits at a meeting. I don't say anything. I have an opinion. I do take the time to prepare ahead of time. And hopefully I'm being seen as one that can help contribute and also put pen to paper when time is required. Thank you.
Thank you. And Agnes, that goes over to you now. How would you respond? Special skills, experience, ideas you bring.
Am I frozen?
No, you're loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay, sorry. So my connection is unstable, so I might disappear. I'm going to start with something, I guess, outside of volunteer experience and work experience and stuff. I'm going to say my attitude. It's interesting because I've been saying this a lot recently, that I'm not afraid to be wrong. And what I mean by that is that if I present an opinion and, that opinion is a little bit iffy, or someone has questions, or somebody else has, a difference of opinion, or proves me wrong, that's especially, that's fine. Like, I'm not very prideful in that regard. Other than that, a new voice, basically.
Thank you very much. Next question, it goes back to Agnes. You'll be the first one for this. I've been receiving an awful lot of questions on the board that sort of follow along the same theme. So I'll just sort of summarize. I'll read one of them verbatim, which sort of summarizes well. What is your position on mandatory continuing development or professional development program?
Okay. Professional development is very important in keeping ourselves current and up to date. I mean, I get so much from speaking with other engineers who have more experience than me. even non-engineers who understand what I'm working on even better than I do. Where am I going with this? I'm saying that there's certain types of professional development that is really hard to document. I'm not sure about this mandate. I know that, not all of the membership is really interested in it. I also know that it was brought in, as far as I know, it was brought in because of the Elliott Lake Mall collapse, which was caused by somebody who wasn't an engineer who had been stripped of their license doing engineering work. So that seems a little flimsy for me, honestly.
Thank you very much. The next one goes to Dana. You're generally speaking, the position on mandatory continuing education.
I think that mandatory participation in the continuing education program is a best practice. It's a best practice that's used in other organizations and it shouldn't be something that PEO shies away from. How that is implemented is a different story, but there is a lot of public trust that's maintained when the members are continuously updating their education. And the PEO is about showing that there's a certain amount of competency with his members, and technologies change, systems change. Continuing education is something that I believe is something that should be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last response goes to Luke. Mandatory and continuing professional development.
The CPD is a must. PEO cannot shy away from it because it helps ensure, it's one of the tools that help ensure competency and help protect the PN's trademark, because the goal of PEO is protect the public interest and having such a program does so. If you do a scan across the country, Ontario is the only regulator that does not have one. And PEO also made a commitment 3 times. There's the Kaden report, there's the Elliott Lake Mall collapse. And there was also a comment made earlier, and I was trying to find the article prior to today, but I couldn't find it. But PEO did that commitment. So what we don't want is something like what happened in BC, where the government stepped in and forced the program. If we are proactive and build it, and when you take the initiative to build it, then it will be done in a way that protect the public interest and make it easy to manage, not come up with a bureaucratic system. But if PEO does it will be simple and fair.
So the next question, and going around the order, is over to you, Luke.
Is what?
It's next question is to you, Luke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. And there's a number of questions that came through the board that touch on the concept of self-regulations and threats to it. There's been some identified, but within the questions. But what I wanted to just throw to you as this general question, what do you see as the biggest threat to self-regulation as it pertains to PEO and the engineering profession?
There's a couple of things. One is the involvement from the provincial government, because we're not responding fast enough. Like that has happened in BC. There was the tailings dam. There was question of CPD, and BC intervened, and because the BC regulator didn't move fast enough. Similar incident happened in Quebec. So there is a threat that PEO is facing. Another one is through his licensure program, because the Ontario government just came up with this 12-month Canadian experience. But unfortunately, the 12-month Canadian experience is being interpreted as knowing Ontario law. It's not about understanding Ontario law. It's how to do business in Ontario and all the ethical aspect attached to it. So the biggest threat is our profession being taken away because we're not able to have a proper scan of what's happening in the country so that we have the ability to respond and address those issues.
And I'm going to throw the response to Agnes on this one. What do you see as our biggest threat to self-regulation?
Okay, I think a lot of the threat really has potential to come from within, where we sort of sabotage ourselves in one way or another. And also basically when governments come in and impose things on PEO or other regulating bodies, which doesn't necessarily always oh goodness. I'm not doing very well with the sentences today. Anyway, the threats that come from within and the threats that come from without, from the government, which a lot of it is important and needed, what comes from there, but we need to be careful that we don't.
And the last response goes to Dana. What do you see as a threat to self-regulation?
The biggest threat to self-regulation, I think it goes back to why PEO is given self-regulation to begin with. And this is this idea of engineers are the most competent in understanding what the engineering profession is. And if at any point in time we appear as though maybe we're not as competent or we're not doing all of the things that are under the mandate or under the PEO Act, then I think that's the biggest threat to self-regulation. As Luke mentioned, if the government thinks that maybe PEO isn't acting quickly enough, or if the public loses trust in the engineering profession, or if it appears some incident happens and it comes down to maybe there should have been more regulation, I think that is always the biggest threat, that there's a loss of public trust and maybe the government has to intervene and say, PEO, you don't, engineers, you aren't self-regulating as you should be. Always a concern.
Thank you. And through the rotation, the next question goes back to you, Dana. There's a couple of questions that I received through the online, and they're in a number of the pre-prepared questions, which revolve around governance, and one of the elements of governance being the council composition and the reform thereof. Could you share your views, if any, on the council composition reform? Should there be LGAs, regional councillors? Where do you see council composition?
Council composition, there's a lot to take into account when looking at what the council composition should be. And there have been a lot of arguments I've heard around this in terms of what skill sets do councillors have? Should they be appointed? Should they be elected? How long should they be in place in their role as a councillor? And I think these are all good questions. Volunteers bring a lot to council. Elected people, as I'm running for now, I think they maybe their experience, they bring some different experience, wouldn't be the first people noticed to be in this sort of representation as maybe opposed to a government appointed council representative. So there has to be a bit of balance, I think, in that there are elected people, they're putting in the time and effort, and appointees, they also have their value. So a lot to consider here. Thank you.
Thank you. And the response next goes to Luke for that. Council composition, what do you see?
Thanks, Arthur. I believe that the format that is currently in place is a good balance for council representation, because there's a lot of component to it. Because there's government appointees that bring the public to the board, so it makes sure that there's all perspective being addressed. Then you got the regional representation, which the three of us are vying for one of those positions. So, and there's all over the province, so there's that geographic representation. And to that, there's also general councillors at large or general appointees in the province, which makes sure that there's a broad representation across the province. And that ensures that volunteers across the province have the chance to participate and bring a broad set of skills. That is also the whole part that I'm running out of time for, as what is defined as a good candidate having the adequate skill set. Sorry, ran out of time.
Thank you. Agnes, to you. What do you think about council composition?
All right. So I've had a few thoughts about this, really. Like, for example, the way that things like the president role are managed, where the president-elect, learns from a time from the other president, stuff like that. Basically, having this continuity of passing the baton, let's say, and maybe holding it at the same time. I think this is very helpful. I also think that, if the question is being asked at all, the council members need to be mostly elected, because we're here we're here to represent the interests of the public. That is key, but we are also here to do so as members of the self-regulated engineering profession.
Thank you. And the next question goes back to you, Agnes. And so, building a little bit on what you previously mentioned, is there anything PO can or should do to enhance its public interest protection mandate?
Okay, I thought you were going in a completely different direction with that. Now,
I'm not trying to trip you up.
Now I'm kind of thrown for a loop. Okay, so in terms of protecting the public, I mean, it goes through a number of items, I guess. Let's say we have the licensing, which that's working, and we have the basically the discipline and that end of things, which also needs to be very well attended to and peopled by individuals who are knowledgeable, who understand the act, and who know what needs to be done. These are really like the key back to basics things, I'm thinking.
Thank you. And the next, first response goes over to Dana. How would you see anything PO should do to enhance public interest protection mandate?
Enhancing the public protection, the mandate, to me is just reaffirming what PO is doing at the moment. So maintaining the high academic standards and professional practice standards, ensuring that any of its members are qualified to do engineering activities. So it's really just doing more of what the PO's mandate is, working with other regulatory bodies, ensuring that PO is communicating with Engineers Canada, OSPI, and making sure we're properly advocated with these organizations, I think is really important. But just continuing to do a lot of the things that PO is currently doing, which are its primary mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next response goes to Luke with respect.
Thanks, Arthur. PO does a lot of good things and it needs to continue what it does. But a part where we could get a lot of bang for very low dollars would be to increase visibility, because the only place that people see that PO has actually done enforcement is in the blue pages, in the dimension. And how many people see that? And sometimes I wonder if the public at large does not understand that PO as a discipline process, as an enforcement process, and how the message gets along to the general public. Because if people were aware that there's such a process and program in place, then they will see that the rest that are properly defined in the Provincial English Act, that PO as an organization is delivering on its mandate. But the part that I think is missing is the visibility of all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for a few more questions. I want to go back to the board here because there's one here that I will preface that it was asked by a software engineer. but I'll summarize the question a little bit. This is the first year that I've seriously contemplated whether or not to renew my PNG license. What can PEO do to attract more members and retain existing members? And that first answer goes to Luke.
To retain and retract, the challenge that the individual is facing is the fact that his PNG status is not being understood by his peers or the people that he works with. His environment does not value that. And what he that individual ends up with is all the negativity surrounding that. So it's all the bad press, all the bad story. What the individual needs to focus on is what it means to be a license holder, to be a professional, the competency and the reputation what it brings is that PNG trademark. I know I've said it many times, but that's the core value. It's the PNG trademark, that it means that work is being done by somebody that's competent, that it's professional, and is bound by a code of ethics to do the right things. That's the message. Thank you.
Thank you. And going down the order would be to Agnes. How would you respond?
Okay. Basically, I'm going to say the biggest thing is that ultimately remaining or becoming a licensed professional engineer should be better for the individual than not, I'm not sure exactly how you'd go about doing that. I was just thinking, I don't know, some kind of salary guidelines or something. But ultimately, I think that's a good part of why people don't renew and why people don't register in the first place. There's no difference. It doesn't matter. And that's no good.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Dana.
Thanks, Arthur. This is one of the major I see as a potential issue for PEO. It's not that software engineering is an emerging discipline by any stretch. It definitely isn't. It's that some of the regulations and laws around it are not even understood by government. So you look at the maybe privacy or cybersecurity issues. These things, the laws are behind in government and in globally, and I think that the regulations at the same time are also behind. So you have this ball of government hasn't developed the laws fully, and maybe the regulations are behind. And the regulations are behind. It's hard to show that there's value in being a professional engineer. So there's one of these things that it's somebody has to regulate it. Some body has to regulate these emerging disciplines, and that to me is under the mandate of PEO. So there's a lot to this topic.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to do a bit of an audible. We're right at the end, but I want to squeeze in one last question. I was wondering if you can be kind enough to be real brief about it. Going to Dana first, then Agnes, and then Luke. What is one thing that you want voters to know about you?
The one thing I want voters to know about me, I'm very passionate about engineering. I am very keen to join the board and get my opinions heard and hopefully represent the Northern region. I've really enjoyed this meeting. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed answering the questions. And I think that hopefully some of my answers have given an idea of where I'm coming from and some of my thoughts. I'm very keen on engineering. I have a family of engineers, so that would be, I guess, that's many things to know about me, but you asked me to be short, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And to you, Luke, what's one thing you want voters to know about Luke?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Sorry
That's
for
quite
that.
Right. One thing.
I really enjoyed my year and a half as a counselor. I believe in the profession, and that's why I'm seeking re-election. That is a lot of good work that's being done, and I want to be part of completing the government's reform that has started, and that's why I'm running for re-election. Is that I'm bringing experience, I'm bringing my enthusiasm, I'm bringing dedication, ready to put pen to paper, and I'm prepared to continue to do so for a second term. Thank you.
Thank you. And Agnes, what's the one thing you want voters to know about you?
You put an emphasis on one. So basically, I'm somebody who will work hard. When I'm committed to something, it's going to happen. And despite how I look today, I am quite energetic, and I have really 14 days out of every 28 completely off work. So that's also nice. Not as nice as being retired, but it's nice. And that's my one thing. Yep.
Thank you so much. So this does conclude the question portion of the meeting. Now each candidate will be afforded 90 seconds for closing remarks. We'll go in the same order that we went in the opening remarks. And so over to that first candidate, Dana Montgomery, your closing remarks.
Thank you, Arthur. I thought those were our closing remarks, so I went on a bit long, I think. Okay, just so I'll reiterate again, I'm very passionate about engineering. I really enjoyed the profession. Engineers do a lot of great work in society, and the self-regulation is not something that it's a privilege, and it's not something that should be taken lightly. And there's a lot of modernization that PO needs to go through. There's a great governance roadmap that is planned. It's going to need strong councillors who are committed to being part of that plan and working with the operations team to make sure that it's really implemented in a great way. I think I would be very happy, very honored to fill that role. PO has been around for 100 years. That's a long time. I like to think that long-term thinking is also a great skill to have. You can't, the best organizations don't think 3 years, 5 years in the future. They really do think 100 years in the future. So what is PO looking like? What can we expect of engineering 100 years from now? Who knows? But the systems can be put in place to respond to many of the challenges that we have today. I'll leave it at that. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. The second candidate, your closing remark, Agnes Probsic.
All right. Well, I'm pretty new to this whole politics thing, so clearly I don't present, well, I'm not going to say anything about how I present. So if you want someone real, someone who's going to represent you, someone who's, like I said earlier, not afraid to be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's fine. Let's be right together, you know? And there's all kinds of other things I could say, but I think that pretty much distills it.
Thank you very much, Agnes. And the final closing remarks from Luc Roberge.
Thanks, Arthur. I'm seeking re-election because I would really like to be given the opportunity to continue the work on the governance review. A lot of good stuff is happening right now. Like we're looking at how to position PO to be a modern regulator, how to more adequately address key issues. We've talked a lot, the three of us, about licensing and how to present ourselves as being able to more adequately adapt to upcoming challenges in our profession. I had the time when I was working, and I'll definitely have the time now as retired to continue to focus and address working on council. As I mentioned earlier, I've been part of the licensing committee, the HR audit. I'm part of the joint relation committee. So that is a proof that I'm committed to allocate time. I also reached out to all the 7 northern chapters, and my invitation has been accepted by 3 of them. So speak with all the chapters on a regular basis to make sure that I can be able to maintain the pulse. So the message I want to give is I'm willing to invest the time and continue working what I've been doing. As a last component, I want to also wish best of luck to Donna and Agnes on the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this concludes tonight's discussion. I would like to thank the candidates for their participation from the bottom of my heart, and also everybody watching and your interest in the governance of the engineering profession. I hope you found the meetings informative and worthwhile. As a reminder, a recording of the meetings will be on PEO's website for the duration of the election. Thank you again to everyone for participating in our discussion. And remember, your profession matters, so does your vote. Voting is quick and easy. You can vote on the internet by phone. Voting opens on January 14th and voting closes at 4 p.m. on February 18th. And all information you need is on the website, www.peo.on.ca. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.